Just ahead on American Black Journal, we're going to devote the entire program to a discussion about the senseless violence that's taking the lives of black Detroiters. We'll talk about black-on-black crime and the use of lethal force by police as we search for answers to stopping the madness. It's a conversation you don't want to miss, so stay right there. American Black Journal starts now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. As we begin a new year, the Black Lives Matter movement continues in full force across the country in response to the fatal police shootings of several unarmed black boys and men. Locally, 35-year-old Kevin Matthews was the latest to die after being shot by a Dearborn police officer. However, the expression Black Lives Matter also represents a call to stop the alarming number of black-on-black crimes in our community. 2015 ended with the murder of 7-year-old Chanel Berry, who was shot while playing with Christmas presents inside her Detroit home. And talented musician Anthony Tolson was gunned down during a carjacking in a store parking lot. Joining me now are two people on the front lines of stopping the violence. Reverend David Bullock, founder of the Change Agent Consortium, and Brenda Hill, a member of the group Mothers of Murdered Children. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Let's start first with this, with the sort of tension that exists between the idea of black-on-black crime versus murders committed by police against African Americans. Some of the criticism of the Black Lives Matter movement is around the idea that, well, why are you focusing on what police do when black people kill each other every day in cities across America? And I get really frustrated and annoyed by those questions. But let's start by talking about why that's a false sort of dichotomy to set up, that it's not about an either or, it is about everything.
Indeed. Well, thanks for having us on the show. I get frustrated too. It's a false dichotomy. We have to confront brutality, period. And of course, police brutality comes with a history and a narrative. I mean, the lynching tree, lynching, the criminal justice system, the penal system as it relates to African Americans in America has, at least historically, been lopsided. And so the fight to make sure that police officers don't use lethal force in a wanton or excessive way against African Americans is a very legitimate battle cry.
Sure.
Now, at the same time, folks tend to maim, steal, and kill within the communities in which they live.
Right.
And so black-on-black crime
is not about people being black.
Right. It's really about where folks live.
You kill people that you know.
That you know, right. But at the same time, we don't think that on the one hand, you can be against police brutality and then not be upset when citizens are brutalizing each other as well. So, you know, it's stopping the use of lethal force when it's unjustified by anybody.
Right. Brenda, one of the other things that really bothers me about this discussion is people will say to me, life is cheap in the black community, and that's what is proven by all the murders that we see. And I always push back on that by saying, if you ever go to a community where a child in particular has been murdered, you will understand how not cheap that life was, and how valued that person was, and how much pain is felt by the people around them. I mean, there really is a disconnect between what people think happens and what really does happen.
But that's what the mainstream media says. With our group, we have mothers whose children are 50 to newborns that have died, have been murdered. And so the pain is real, the pain is the same. They're no less upset, trying to find justice. no matter what the age of the child is.
Yeah.
And so anyone who says that is really insensitive to the fact that no parent wants to bury their child, but no one wants to bury their child to murder, ever.
Yeah, yeah, and in Detroit, in cities like Detroit, this is an everyday kind of thing. I mean, this happens over and over and over again, and the despair that grows out of that repetitive nature of this is really, really concerning.
Well, I don't know if it's specific to Detroit, but we're talking about Detroit.
Sure.
But the despair is, the death is just the pebble. The ripple effect of that death, that murder, is what is harming our community.
Yeah.
From the fact that parents don't know what to do when they get that call, to the fact that a lot of these crimes aren't being solved. And with that, you know, a parent is wondering if the person in the grocery store is that guy.
Right.
You know, or if the people down the street know. You know, so, and then where do they get help 2 years out, 4 years out, 6 years out? That's what Mothers of Murdered Children is here for. But some people slip through the cracks. Some people never get any attention. And that's what we're here to change.
Yeah, yeah. Reverend Bullock, I know that you have been involved with some of the response to Kevin Matthews' killing right before Christmas. Talk about that instance and how it fits in the larger context of this discussion about lethal force on the part of the police.
Well, definitely, you know, and we pray for Kevin Matthews' family and continue to fight for justice in that case. But here you have a case of a young man who had mental challenges, mental health challenges, had an interaction with police the day before. It was petty larceny. Now, I don't know what that means, but it's Skittles, chips.
Right. All of the things, the trivial things that we have been told are somehow justification
for being killed by the police. And they saw him the next day and wanted to apprehend him. And of course, the Dearborn police have tasers. Police are trained in takedown methodology. But this police officer or those police officers decided to shoot him multiple times. And so that is excessive. And if this were just one case, you know, maybe people would be able to have, I guess, a calmer response to this. But, you know, we've seen across the country where law enforcement, when they interact with African-American males specifically, but even with Sandra Bland. I mean, when we see
the woman in Texas.
In Texas, when we saw Sandra Bland, she was alive. She entered police custody and was no longer alive. Right. So something happened with law enforcement. And so Kevin Matthews becomes just another name on the list of folks that lost their life in the hands of trained people.
Right. People who we expect, people who we give weapons to because we expect that they will behave differently than other people. They have training and they are supposed to have some accountability for the way they use those weapons. Talk about the response that you've already gotten from the Dearborn police about what they plan to do and how soon and transparent that process might be.
Well, this is what's very interesting about police brutality, and for people who say, well, why does the Black Lives Matter movement focus on police brutality? Well, because police brutality is in part about police departments. It's about police protocols around the use of lethal force and their mental health training and diversity and interacting with communities. But it's also about the threshold of the law. And so the police chief obviously wants an investigation to be handled appropriately. Chief Craig, the Detroit Police Department, has taken on that investigation. But
because it happened in Detroit,
right? So they
even though it was
so the Dearborn police came into Detroit, right, and raises all kind of questions about whether or not they were supposed to do that, if they were justified in doing that. But ultimately, this is going to end up on the desk of the county prosecutor, and the law favors police officers. All they have to say is, I felt threatened. Right, and we saw this in the Tamir Rice case, right?
With the 12-year-old.
With the 12-year-old in Cleveland, exactly, who became a thug, you know, and he didn't even have a real gun. Of course, Kevin Matthews did not have a gun at all.
He was unarmed,
And so part of this conversation is, how do we change the public policy You know, how do we lower that threshold so that we can actually get some convictions when law enforcement's wrong?
Yeah.
And I
Go ahead.
also think Dearborn is unique. Dearborn only has 6% African American
Yeah.
citizens in a city that's right across the street from Dearborn.
Right.
But you can
From
go
Detroit,
to Westland from
yeah.
Detroit, and you can go to Westland, who's further away from Detroit, and they have 30% African Americans. So
Well, there's a
something-
history of
there's a history.
relations between Dearborn and Detroit, black and white, that goes way back.
That's serious. That's
Yeah.
really serious. There's a reason African Americans don't want to live there, and there's a reason they're not allowed to
Don't
live there.
feel welcome,
Absolutely.
necessarily
And that's
in
right
Dearborn.
across the street from Detroit.
Yeah.
And then intimidate African Americans out of living there, but feel compelled to chase down the least of us. A person who's been known to have a mental illness, and chase him down and drag him into a backyard and shoot him down.
Yeah.
You know, and those things harken back to the history of this country. And so we paid those officers. We talked to the chief. He said 70,000 African Americans come into Dearborn every day.
Right,
But
to shop and to
And
work.
shop down the street,
Yes.
Yeah, right.
you know, from where Kevin Matthews was killed. And not to cut Brenda off, but to interject, Kevin Matthews had a warrant in Redford.
Yes.
Right. So why not
Right.
call the
Call the
Redford,
Redford
police,
police
and have
and-
him
right.
picked up by them
Right.
and extradited? Or,
And
right,
why
so-
are we putting mentally ill people on probation?
Well, right.
That sets them up to be criminalized.
That's a whole other
Yes,
issue that we
absolutely.
don't put money into resources to treat mentally ill people
Yes.
for their illnesses as opposed
But
to as criminals.
Dearborn stops 26 times more people, African Americans,
Yeah.
than white people. There's an issue. And so when you say someone who is given authority runs down one of the least of us,
Right, right.
and shoots them and says, "Oh, I was scared." Well, your job means that you have to have conviction.
You aren't. You are
Yes.
supposed to be able to deal with that fear in a way that stops short of
Well, both of
taking someone's
us,
life.
and I heard someone say this, both of us can't be scared.
Right.
And you get paid not to be scared.
Right, right.
You know, and
right.
but
or to
but-
handle that fear in a
different
professional manner.
Absolutely.
I wrote a column about in the Detroit Free Press about Tamir Rice a few weeks ago when the prosecutor there decided not to press charges against, or grand jury decided not to press charges against the officer. And I drew a connection between the lethal use of police force and the violence we see in black communities, and that the official sort of cheapening of black life, the official sanction of these incidents really does send a message into the black community that if you kill a black person, it's not the same as somebody else. It really does try to say to us that our lives don't matter.
You know what's powerful about that point? Symbolically, the official cheapening does send that message, but the official cheapening of black life is official too.
Right.
I mean, with
It is
respect to
official.
public education.
Right.
with you know, I remember when in school there was character development in school with respect to resources for folks living in poverty.
Right.
So when you talk about the cheapening of black life,
That's a much more
it's
systemic.
bigger than
Sure.
symbolic.
Yeah.
And the official cheapening, you know, just reeks in an institutional way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think we see the effects of that in our
And
community.
then how do you have that with your child, that conversation? You're having all the conversations trying to get them to adulthood.
Right.
But how do you have that conversation that you have to watch your
You
back
have to behave
with
differently.
police, and it may be your fault, and please get to school, and a mother begging their children, just please come home safe, whatever you have to do. And the person that's the big bad monster isn't the guy around the corner.
It
It's
may
the
be the
police.
police
It is the
officer.
police.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is. And every day, you know, they're having those conversations about the police saying you're a target and you've done nothing but be black.
Yeah. Well, we could continue this conversation for years. We'll keep tabs on what happens, though, with Kevin Matthews' death in Dearborn. And thank you both for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coming up next, I'll talk with two women who've started a movement to pray the violence out of Detroit. But first, here's a look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1957, Elvin Davenport, a Wayne County assistant prosecutor, was sworn in as Common Pleas Court judge. In 1965, Come See About Me by the Supremes was the nation's top song.
So won't you hurry? Come on, boy, see about me.
And in 1979, Detroit-reared recording artist and actress Aaliyah was born. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
There's a grassroots movement underway in Detroit to stop black-on-black violence through the power of prayer. The group is called Pray the Violence Out of Detroit, and they're asking every woman in the city to join their efforts. The idea was inspired by an award-winning documentary about 3,000 women in Liberia who effectively prayed for an end to a bloody civil war. The film is titled Pray the Devil Back to Hell.
Money, greed, ethnicity,
absolute power.
There is nothing that should make people do what they did to the children of Liberia. The warlords gave these boys guns and sent them off.
They just do anything because they had guns.
You go to bed saying, God, please. What do we do? I had a dream, and it was like a crazy dream. We decided to protest.
We wore the white, saying to people we were out for peace. Thousands of women, Muslim and Christian, were coming together,
calling for peace. These women had seen the worst, but they still had that vibrance for life.
And we said, well, if I should get killed, just remember me that I was fighting for peace.
We stepped out first and did the unimaginable. To send out a signal to the world that we, the Liberian women, we are tired of the killing of our people. We can do it again if we want to.
I want to hear now, gratefully acknowledge the powerful voice of women.
Joining me now are two members of the local prayer movement. Amanda Johnson is the organizer of Pray the Violence Out of Detroit, and she's joined by Minister Essie Collins, who was also involved in the Liberian prayer movement. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the Liberian movement, which I think is absolutely fascinating. It's credited with having convinced two factions in a civil war to stop fighting. Talk to me about how that worked and how powerful that was.
Well, during the Liberian Civil War that lasted for over 14 years, it was a time of devastation for the Liberians. And imagine around Christmas time where mothers were shopping for their children and they had to run out of the streets because there was a brutal war that had erupted in the country. And after so many years of trying to bring that war to an end that actually did not happen, that's when the women of Liberia gathered together in 2003 and they began to pray. Prior to that, we were staying home and praying because no one could get in the streets. If you did, you got killed. So we were home praying for our families and couldn't get out there. There was no food, there was no water. I'm a survivor of the Liberian Civil War, and I credit that to the Almighty God, and first of all to the prayers that were being offered, interceding for our people, that God himself would supernaturally intervene and bring that brutal civil war to an end. And that's exactly what happened. But one thing is that I came to this country in 1999. So prior to the movement, I was already here. But then,
I see.
Yes, before then, we were praying, but they didn't have the power to get out there because there was violence everywhere.
Right.
So
And the prayers were in public. I mean, what changed was that women began praying publicly for
Absolutely. Women began to pray publicly, and there were women from everywhere. It wasn't a particular group of women, to say Christians or what have you. We just called on women, and God answered.
Yeah.
So, because I know, I believe in the power of prayers, and I know that when God intervenes in any situation that you put before him, the result can be very good.
Yeah, a powerful example of that. And Amanda, that's what you hope to bring to Detroit with your group, this sort of coming together of women around the idea of prayer to stop the violence, both within the community and from outside it.
Yes. I have been disturbed for many years about escalating violence in our community, but the death of Anthony Tolson represented a particular heartbreak for me.
And this was the musician killed just a few days before
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve, right.
Yes. I didn't know Anthony personally, but he was a music minister, a bass player for our congregation and the church that he was attending currently, that he had just left when he was carjacked and brutally murdered. A particular heartbreak.
Sure.
I met his mom, Allison, and she asked me to attend a news conference, and that really got this whole thing rolling for me. I was really moved by comments that Councilman James Tate and Andre Spivey made.
Yeah.
They gave a clarion call to action, and I was challenged, and I was praying during that news conference, and I was just asking God, what is my role in this? And he said, do what you're doing right now, pray.
Yeah.
And I thought about Essie because we are co-workers serving young children and their families.
Okay.
And we had just spoken, not days prior, about the prayer movement in Liberia. And then I contacted another friend who's here praying for us right now, Ollie Corder. And from there, a few other women who I felt would be committed to this.
Yeah. And what you're asking for is women across the city to embrace this and offer prayer.
Yes, and Liberia holds a special place in my heart because it was established by freed slaves.
Right.
So they're the true African Americans. They came from Africa, they were American, and they returned
home.
Right. But Afrocentric thought is anchored on the matrix of motherhood. That's where our cultural roots are.
Sure.
I can give you a really good example. I was working with some colleagues at Timbuktu Academy a few weeks ago, and when I walked into the school, I was greeted with, "Good morning, Mama." And every woman that came into the building received that same greeting.
Sure.
The implication is that we're all responsible for the community's children.
Right.
And
what a
they
powerful
should be able to depend on all of us.
Yeah, and what a powerful message to impart at this time when our children are at such terrible risk.
Yeah.
And so is there a planned sort of public face of this that you want to begin soon?
Yes, we met on New Year's Day and started to strategize. We have a dedicated phone line. People can call in and get updates from us. Each of us are trying to engage our own personal networks, our professional networks, using social media, any tools that are available to us.
Yeah.
And planning a viewing of Pray the Devil Back to Hell.
A public viewing of it.
Where we can really try to engage even more women.
So people can see what happened in Liberia and what power it might have here. You know, I wonder at any point in the Liberian struggle, did you ever doubt that what you were doing could actually make a difference?
No.
No.
Because when you are in a desperate situation and you have experienced the hand of God in your life, then anything else doesn't matter because you know that you had a testimony before. And if God did it before, he can do it again.
Yeah.
So we had no doubt that at the appointed time, God was going to supernaturally intervene and bring that brutal civil war to an end.
Did the sides in the Civil War, what was their reaction to what the women were doing? I mean, they couldn't have been happy about it.
Well, they had no choice because it was, I mean, God was the one we were crying out to, so they had no choice. But at the same time, the women, because I have left Liberia by then,
right?
But the women were involved in all of the peace talks. They make sure that they were part of those various peace talks that were held in some parts of Africa, and their voices were being heard.
Right.
So because of that, they forced the rebels to know that, hey, we are mothers. We are the ones who carry these babies for 9 months, and we need you guys to stop killing them,
right,
and start putting guns into these babies' hands.
Right.
So that happened, and we were okay.
Yeah, we've got about 20 seconds left. How soon do you hope to get this up and running here in Detroit?
Dr. King said the urgency of now, now.
Okay.
And so we're engaging people. We have the dedicated phone line, email address set up, and in the process of trying to establish a website.
Yeah.
So
to get this going, okay.
I'll share all that information with you.
Well, good luck to both of you, and God help all of us in the city to benefit from this.
And I want to say one thing before we close, that what is
quickly
going on right now is almost like a civil war. We may not understand, but it looks like a civil war, and we
in
can,
Detroit.
God can intervene if we sincerely pray.
Yeah. Thank you. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter, and you can also hear our program on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time. That was great. We got a lot done in 9 minutes.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.